In this video, we're going to look at Bitcoin's price history and its current price trajectory, where it could be going. What's interesting about Bitcoin is that it tends to hit an acceleration phase as the uptrend gets going. So it starts as, a relatively slow kind of rounded bottom, and then it starts to really accelerate into the final stages and into the top. So this has happened in these other rallies where it starts edging out slower and then really goes almost vertical, and we could be getting near that acceleration phase in this current rally in 2023. It's 2024 now. So this is what it looks like on the daily chart, where it's been just kind of this slow, choppy upward movement, but you can start to see getting a little bit more of a runaway here, and that could continue to happen as it goes. So I just wanted to look at the price history. We're just going to use a monthly chart to keep the chart a little bit clean. And what I have on the chart here is what's called a zigzag, and it just is set to show every price move of 70% or more. So it's good for kind of filtering out all the small moves. And what we notice right away is that big drops, this one was 82%, often followed by big rallies. And we had one little false start here in 2014 where the price dropped 70% and then only rallied 100. We've already well exceeded that, up almost 200% at one point. I think right now we're up about 180, just a little bit off, 180%, just a little bit off the, just barely pulling back off the highs that it had reached earlier, but well up into the near 200% rally off this 2022 low. So I think we're out of this territory here where we're just kind of in a little false start and then we have a big dump, but who knows, the future will determine that. We could get one of these big drops at any time. That is worth noting. The risk of Bitcoin, loads of 70% drops over the last decade, and if we were to drop this to 50%, you would see that there are just a ton of 50% drops over the last decade. So definitely a volatile asset, but I think this just kind of really shows how the price moves, and you can see just really big drops in here, followed by big rallies. And yeah, we have this at 70%. And so we can see the rallies coming off these lows, 11,000%, 11,500 off this one, 1,746 off this one. Again, the false start I mentioned, 1,200% coming off that last one. This is the smallest one that we saw in 2019. The price rallied 344% following an 84% decline. 1,692% was the rally off the 2020 low. Upton here, I believe it was about 1,580% to this first one. Ended up going a tiny bit higher later in the year, but really this was kind of the acceleration phase you wanted to catch. This was a big decline of greater than 50%. Now we're at this one. We declined 77%. For the most part, these have resulted in big rallies almost all the time, except for that false start, which I don't believe is playing out this time, but again, we can never know for sure. So if a 344% rally were to develop, that actually puts us right near the old high, just kind of near 67, 69, 70,000, that area up in here. So that's an interesting scenario. And if this acceleration phase were to continue, it could push the price even higher. If we measure this out, 344%, that's a pretty small rally historically, so we could see a rally go higher. 500%, we're in about that. 550% puts us around 100. And now that seems like a huge rally, and it is by almost any other asset that we look at, but for Bitcoin, it's actually a pretty small rally. Most of these other rallies have been over 1,600%. So 100, 200, getting up into the 200,000 range, that puts us into 1,200%. That's getting, higher up there. So I'm not making those kind of big targets, but 70,000, well within reach. That's the smallest rally we've seen other than that little false start in 2014. And 550, just a little bit bigger than that, gets us close to the $100,000 mark, big psychological level. So we'll see if this acceleration phase continues, and if we kind of project that out based on some of these other ones and how they've accelerated, that's about mid-year getting to 100,000. So about 6 months out, we're right at the start of 2024. Again, and that is contingent on this acceleration phase continuing. Of course, it could fizzle and we could get another drop. As mentioned, Bitcoin, lots of big drops. But if that acceleration phase does continue, 70,000 definitely within the ballpark of getting hit. That would match this smallest rally that we've seen over the last decade following one of these big declines. That wasn't a false start. And a little bit bigger puts us at 100, which I think is a big psychological level. So that's kind of how Bitcoin looks, and you can look at this chart and make your own assessment and use your own strategies. Always consider your risk of Bitcoin a very volatile asset, so it may not be right for everyone, but something to consider looking at these big cycles and the acceleration phase in Bitcoin.